My name's Linda Halloran, and I'm the Community Engagement Manager with Town and Country Federal Credit Union. And I want to thank you for joining us tonight for this virtual financial wellness workshop on the sandwich generation caught in the middle. If you're joining us tonight, you're likely finding yourself among the sandwich generation, adults who are responsible for their own needs as well as the care and support of both their dependent children and aging family members. To help us better understand some of the challenges, the resources, and options available to assist families as they juggle multi-generational financial needs, we've invited attorney Judah Shaw to join us tonight. Judah Shaw is an advocate for the financial health and well-being of Maine families. Since 2008, she has served as the Securities Administrator for the State of Maine's Office of Securities. Before that, Judy was Deputy Superintendent for the Maine Bureau of Insurance. She's an active member of the North American Securities Administrators Association and has served as President, Secretary to the Board, and Chair of the Enforcement Section Committee. She is also co-chair of the Maine Council for Elder Abuse Prevention, a coalition of public and private partners dedicated to reducing elder abuse and financial exploitation of Mainers. She is a graduate of the University of Maine and obtained her law degree from Widener School of Law in Wilmington, Delaware. So let's welcome Judy Shaw.
Thank you so much, Linda. I really appreciate being invited by Town and Country to give this presentation. It's really an important presentation, and I think during the course of my remarks this evening that everyone will identify with something that we end up talking about. So let's get started. The sandwich generation caught in the middle. And as I said, I think all of us will be able to identify with some form of sandwich that we're going to talk about. So what is the sandwich generation? Well, the sandwich generation, which actually was added to Webster's dictionary, I think around 2006 or so, and is sometimes known as the SandGEN, really embellishes adults who are responsible for the care and support of themselves, first and foremost, saving for their own retirement, but also perhaps raising children or caring for grandchildren, while at the same time caring for elderly family members. There are many stressors on us as adults. We often enter into our career thinking we'll have a career, we'll retire, life will be good. But in reality, what we find is today, approximately 47% of adults in the United States in their 40s and 50s have a parent 65 or older that they are helping care for, and also are raising a child or supporting an adult child of their own. Indeed, of that 47%, it's estimated that 1 in 7 of these adults are indeed financially helping both of their parents, as well as one or more young or adult children. It's a lot. So let's talk about the different types of sandwiches that we have in this generation. We have our traditional sandwich here represented by a grilled cheese sandwich. And those are people who are sandwiched, if you will, between aging parents who need their care or help. And at the same time, they're helping their own children. It could be their own children who are youth, or it could be their adult children. In the middle, we have the club sandwich. The club sandwich are those in their 50s or 60s generally who are sandwiched between an aging parent or parents, adult children and grandchildren, or sometimes it's people who are in their 30s and 40s with their own young children, and they're taking care of aging parents and sometimes grandparents on top of that as well. And then the last sandwich that we see here is the open-faced sandwich. And that's basically anyone else who finds themselves involved in caring for elderly family members. And it's estimated that at least 25% of us at some point in our lives are going to fall in this open-faced sandwich situation. We are finding in Maine, and I'm sure that this is not isolated to Maine, that particularly with the increase in substance use disorders, we are seeing more and more grandparents who are caring for their grandchildren while their own adult children are perhaps seeking treatment for their substance use disorder, or maybe they're just struggling with the disorder itself and haven't quite reached the point where they can feel comfortable reaching out for help. So as I said, it's a lot of stressors, and stressor at a time, oftentimes where we really thought we were going to simply be taking care of ourselves, that we had raised our own children in many instances, and we were ready to just focus our attention on ourselves and our retirement, and then find that we are sandwiched in the middle. So where do you fit in with all of these sandwiches? What part are you of the SandGEN? Are you planning for your own retirement? Are you responsible for the care of children? Again, either youth or adult or both. Are you responsible for the care of elderly family members? If you aren't now, you might be in the future. So think about how being part of any of these groups might affect you. And have you done some planning? Have you done some thinking? Are you prepared for the challenges of raising children, the challenges of aging parents? My children are all adults now. I did not anticipate the challenges in trying to parent young adults, and there are many wonderful rewards from raising adult children, from parenting adult children, but it's a whole different ballgame, I've learned. And there are many, many complexities in being responsible, not only for ourselves and planning for ourselves, caring for ourselves, but also caring for children and elderly family members. Here's some things to think about for yourself. What I want to do throughout the course of this presentation is to talk about each of these categories. What are some things to think about planning for your own retirement and caring for yourself? What are things to think about when we talk about your care or support of children and then elderly family members as well? So let's look at you in this middle layer of the sandwich, if you will, that middle layer where you are planning for your own retirement. Maybe you are early on in your career and you're planning for your retirement. You could be mid-career. Maybe you have found yourself in a situation where you're nearing retirement. Think about what you need for your retirement. Some statistics show that 35 to 49% of the sandwich generation may not have adequate retirement assets. The trick is there's no magic formula for answering the question of what do you need for retirement. It really depends upon you, your own circumstances, your goals for retirement and your needs. And indeed, all of those things may change over time. Perhaps as I near my retirement age, my goals would be, well, I want to do some traveling. I want to be a snowbird and spend part of my year in a warmer climate, and then spend the beautiful summers and autumns in Maine. Perhaps I want to not retire entirely, but I want to work part-time. And those goals and objectives can certainly shift because there's so much uncertainty in life. If anything, that's one thing we've learned from the pandemic, that there is a great deal of uncertainty. Some questions to consider for yourself. Do you plan to retire early? Do you plan, as I said, to seek part-time employment? One of my brothers retired when he was age 54, but since that time, he's worked just 10 hours a week as a consultant, just enough to keep him active and engaged in his selected career. Do you plan on leaving a legacy to your children or to charities? One thing that I would offer that we should all keep in mind is that when we plan on what our estate plan will be, think about what you really want to see for the use of that money. Do you want your money to be used for you to enjoy during your lifetime? Is there a portion that you want to leave to your children or grandchildren or specific charities? The choice is ours. And I think that's what I want to emphasize, is the choice is ours. Others do not necessarily dictate what we do with our money, but planning is essential. Are you aware of different possible pitfalls. Again, we envision a particular world when we retire, and it doesn't always turn out that way. So we do have to spend some time thinking about what are some of the possible pitfalls. Even budgeting for retirement, we have to think about things that people sometimes forget. Are you budgeting for annual gift giving? Are you budgeting for vacations that you want to take? How about special events like weddings, for example? Have you thought about what will happen if your health declines or your health changes? What about inflation? We're all talking about inflation. We were just talking before the presentation started about some of the amazing prices for groceries these days. And how about the possible death of a spouse? We have certainly seen situations where a couple in their late 40s, quite unexpectedly, excuse me, the husband passed away, and the wife was not prepared for that, and was not prepared to be able to manage things on her own. So again, start planning, start saving early. Educate yourself, become well informed. Linda mentioned terrific resources that are available on the Town and Country website to help you with that. An additional source of information is the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Their website is cfpb.gov, and they have some great planning tools and information. And if you're considering seeking assistance from a financial professional, always do your due diligence first before you decide who you want to work with. There's information on our website at investors.maine.gov on how to pick a financial professional, how to know the difference between a broker-dealer and an investment advisor, and the questions to ask when you interview potential advisors. And also, you should always check to make sure that they're properly licensed with our office and get background information on them as well. It's important to remember that you're not alone. The statistics show that the majority, 66% of people consider paying for their children's college tuition a parental responsibility. These are some of the stressors, some of the challenges that we have to think about, some of the choices that we have to make. More than 1 in 8 adults ages 65 and older live with one of their children. That is something to keep in mind as well. Making sure that as we age, we are not socially isolating is a key way to protect ourselves from fraudsters and scam artists. They identify people who are socially isolated, who maybe do not have family members with them, and they often will target them. Approximately 16 million Americans, based upon a study from 2006. At that point, approximately 16 million Americans are members of the sandwich generation. So what are some other helpful tips and hints to think about? Here's a quick little checklist on things that we can be doing all the time. And here we are at the beginning of 2022, and that's always a great time to do a little inventory of ways in which we can do a little financial checkup, if you will. Organizing your financial records, knowing how long you have to keep certain records, maintaining them, having those financial records, including any investment statements, bank records, and insurance documents in good order. In the world of electronic financial transactions, this is becoming easier and easier because we can organize those financial records electronically, or oftentimes perform our financial transactions electronically as well. Again, start your retirement planning early. Make sure that you're setting some pretty clear and realistic goals for what you want your retirement to look like. And if you're working with a financial professional, make sure that you're reviewing any investments you have with your financial professional to make sure that your financial goals are still current and your risk tolerance is still accurate for where you are and where you want to be. We humans are not stagnant individuals. We are very dynamic, and our lives are dynamic. So we always have to be doing that little checkup to make sure that our goals and our risk tolerance and our objectives are on par with where we want to be. Again, if you're working with financial professionals, make sure that you've checked with our office to get their background and make sure they're properly licensed or registered. Think about creating that realistic budget. As I mentioned, one of the categories that we find that people forget to include in their budget is gifting. We all know that birthdays are going to roll around, or we know that there's an anticipated baby shower, or there's going to be a wedding, or holidays are going to roll around, and yet we forget to budget for that. And we end up maybe getting some debt at the end of the year. You'll see many news stories at the end of the year about people accumulating debt around holiday gift giving. So make sure that you're controlling your debt, that you have a budget, and that will give you some comfort and reduce some of the stress that we often feel around finances. Finances can create a tremendous amount of stress for all of us. So develop these and some other good general money management habits, and that can help you move more smoothly toward your retirement. So what if you're caring for children, maybe youth, or maybe adult children? Let's talk about youth for a minute. Some considerations: the expense of raising a child from birth to age 18 is estimated to be somewhere between $227,000 to $264,000. And my guess is that that may be even a little higher with the pandemic situation, with inflation and some other cost factors that have come to play. Educational expenses, college tuition is really high. Educational expenses, the average price of private college is approximately $47,000 per year, according to one source that I looked at. And public in-state tuition is somewhere in the neighborhood of $20,000 a year. That's a lot of money. And making decisions about whether or not you are going to help finance that education, the extent to which your child is going to help contribute to that, or look for scholarships, grant opportunities, loans, and the like, those are important decisions to make. And how about if your kids return home? We sometimes refer to adult children who return home as boomerang kids. So let's talk about the boomerang kids for a minute. 2020 research done by the Pew Research Center has estimated that as of July 2020, 52% of young adults age 18 to 29 were residing with their parents. Before 2020, the highest was in the 1940 census at the end of the Great Depression. And at the end of the Great Depression, 48% of that age group lived with their parents. Now, the Pew Research Center estimates that that high 52% in part is due to the pandemic. And they think especially there was this increase, especially during periods during the pandemic when some college campuses were closed, and colleges were doing remote learning. We also see other factors. Certainly, the high cost of housing remains a huge factor. And certainly that cost of education. We have moved beyond the recession into the period of inflation and pandemic. And I'm not sure that limited job prospects are the issue at this point, but I'm intrigued to see what further study might say about what is known as the Great Resignation. And that might tell us more about this, this trend as well. So it's very interesting to watch the trends and the fluctuation with boomerang kids, young adults who find themselves returning home. There was one study that indicated they had surveyed a group of young adults and asked them what they thought about returning to home to live, and they said they actually thought it was the best retirement plan possible. So let's think about boomerang kids and some considerations. as well as younger children. All of these things are things that you can put in play to try to give your children the best foundation possible when they reach the point where they are managing their own money and they're responsible for their career, they're responsible for their own retirement planning. So certainly very early on, we can involve children in household money matters. One of my colleagues was telling me that his young 4-year-old granddaughter recently spent a snow day when they had lost power, counting out coins and preparing them to put in wrappers so that they could take them to the credit union to cash them in. What a great way to teach her about money and finances. And we should, of course, be modeling responsible money management behaviors. Think about the impact of using retirement assets for educational expenses. Many professionals will recommend against using your retirement assets for educational expenses. Again, there's so much uncertainty and so much variability that can occur in retirement that they recommend it is better actually to get student loans, seek scholarships, seek grants, save for educational expenses rather than draw from your retirement. But a good question to be asking yourself, and if you have a financial advisor, certainly seeking advice from them as well. How about whether or not you are willing or able to pay for your children's education? It's an important conversation to have with your children as they reach their high school years and are making decisions about further education, whether it's a four-year college, a master's degree, law school, medical school, what have you. Having a plan, having an understanding on a realistic understanding and a realistic expectations about what works. Is it certainly possible that your child has decided they absolutely must go to Columbia University? Sure, but a conversation about whether or not that is realistic, given the cost and given the value of that type of education, is a conversation to be had. In terms of boomerang children, setting some financial ground rules, it's important. It's a difficult but important piece to consider. And what are some ground rules that you might take into consideration? One of my family members said that I should install a revolving door on my house because it's either my adult children or my adult nieces or nephews have all lived with me at one point or another when they were going through some challenging and difficult times. And each time I set some ground rules for them. So what are some of the ground rules you might consider? And I used some of these. Well, does your boomerang child need to either be working, seeking work, or maybe studying and getting an education? That's one ground rule I had. You weren't going to come live with me and just sort of hang out. You needed to be working toward something. Should they be contributing to the household, maybe doing household chores, or maybe paying rent, or maybe contributing to the groceries or to utilities? Maybe while they're living with you, you want them to be educating themselves about finance and money management so that when they do move out on their own, they have a strong foothold in that space as well. What is clear about parenting adult children is once they become adults and have entered their own career, have entered their own adult world, we can try to guide them, but we can no longer effectively direct them the way we might have been able to when they were 5, 6, 7 years old, even 12, perhaps. For example, we might think that hiring a financial advisor is the smartest money management step that our boomerang child could take, but if we tell them that's what they should do, they can view it as being treated like a child and then resist our suggestion. So we have to be very careful about the manner in which we communicate when we are parents of adult children. So how can you help? So here's one idea: modeling responsible money management, letting them see how you're budgeting, managing your own money, being able to maintain your household and plan for your retirement. Have adult conversations about that and really listen to and encourage them to ask questions and listen to what they may be thinking about in that regard. Maybe if they're paying you rent, set aside some of that rent or all of it if you can, without telling them. This is what I did. I charge minimal rent, but it was an amount that they had to pay. I set it aside without telling them. And then when they moved out, I gave it all back to them so that they would have money for a security deposit. And they were very appreciative of that, of course, but they also felt like they had some ownership in being able to stay with me for a period of time. Explain, if we go back to the example, if you think a financial advisor makes sense, maybe you could explain to them how a financial advisor has helped you. You could ask them about their goals if they were to have a financial advisor, and really listen. Ask them what they would want to get from a financial advisor. Do they want to learn how to handle and manage their finances? Or do they just want someone that they could turn everything over to who can handle it for them? Or is it some combination of the two? And none of those are perfectly right or wrong. It's really a personal decision. So if we can guide our adult children in making those decisions, they can be on a more solid footing when they get out on their own. And so you can explain to them the value you have found with having a financial advisor, for example, or the value you have found in the manner in which you've managed your money, to try to guide them, educate them, and lead them along the way. So let's talk about elderly family members. Sometimes this can be, in some respects, the most difficult. There's so much emotion involved. We think that our parents, at least I always thought my parents would be there for me forever, and they're both gone now. I said when my mother passed that no matter how old you are, when both of your parents have passed, you were still an orphan, and it very much feels that way. There are lots of issues that need to be considered. And I think many of us in Maine have either find ourselves now or found ourselves in the past caring for elderly family members. Rising healthcare costs, our longer life expectancy, the very heavy costs of funeral expenses, if that hasn't been planned for, are all difficult stressors that relate to caring for elderly family members. And certainly the potential for disagreements among family members, if appropriate planning hasn't occurred in advance, can be an extreme stressor as you're desperately trying to care for aging parents. So what are some things that we can do? First of all, initiate a dialogue about financial matters with your parents, but this has to be done very carefully. And we have to be very sensitive to the fact that we don't want to appear to be taking control. It's very much like our adult children can be made to feel like little children again. We can inadvertently make our parents or other elderly family members feel like there's a role reversal, and they're no longer parenting you, are now parenting them. So we have to be careful about that. We have to be careful to try to avoid as much as possible any family squabbles when it comes to dealing with family finances. I think that all of us could help our children if we could engage in these dialogues ourselves early on. I've started to have these conversations with my own adult children because I want to have things in place. I want there to be an understanding before I reach the point where I'm the elderly parent that they want to and need to care for. Dr. Bonnie Olson out of the University of Southern California talks about the need to, what she refers to as titrate the relationship. That if we can have these conversations early on and just have start some simple conversations about financial matters and what the future holds and what types of things are in place or might need to be in place, then as we age and as our life stage progresses, it's much easier to have that conversation. It would be much easier for me to have a conversation with my adult children to say, you know what, I find that I'm starting to struggle dealing with this particular financial matter. My budgeting seems to be off a little bit. Could you help me with that? And then as we progress, if we need help in other areas, we'll be more inclined to do so. So I love that idea of titrating that relationship, having those conversations early on. If possible, talk to our elderly family members about, do you have estate documents? Are they current? If they don't have estate documents like a will or trust, or help them get appropriate legal advice. We were very fortunate in the state of Maine to have an organization called Maine Legal Services for the Elderly. If you're not familiar with them, I recommend that you take a look at their website. Maine Legal Services for the Elderly makes available high quality legal services for Maine residents age 60 and older. And they help with a whole host of issues, including wills, trusts, powers of attorney. And if they're unable to assist, they have attorneys who have agreed to be on a roster of available attorneys who can provide, private attorneys who can provide services. We want to make sure that that we know where to locate relevant documents to the extent we can. And again, we have to be very careful and very sensitive about this. We don't want to be too intrusive, but find a way to have a dialogue to start that conversation so that our family members are willing to let us know that if something happens, when something happens, this is where you can locate key insurance documents, retirement, and other investment accounts. I have a book at home that I purchased that can lay all of this out for my children. So this book will be in my safe, and it lays all of this information out. It lays out what I want for funeral arrangements and the like. It identifies my advisors, my attorney, and all of that, so that everything will be in one place for them, how they can access my accounts and the like. Know who their advisors are. Do they have accountants, lawyers, other financial professionals? Who are their doctors? Try to learn as much as you can. And if they don't want to share the information, respect their privacy at that point, and then try again, find delicate ways to try. What we want to avoid, if possible, is that idea of jumping in and trying to take over when we start to see our family member struggle. We don't want to make them feel bad, like make them feel less important. That role reversal situation, it can be very real. You may want to certainly talk to them about whether they would like, if they have a financial professional here in Maine, financial advisors can obtain the name of a trusted third-party contact. So what's the value of that? Well, the value of asking a family member if maybe they would like to identify you or someone else as a trusted third-party contact is, if that family member reaches out to their financial advisor, for example, and they say, I just met this wonderful man online and he's located in Nigeria, but he needs some money, so I want to wire transfer $30,000 to Nigeria. There's some red flags there. And by having the name of a trusted third-party contact, that financial advisor would be allowed to contact you, if you're the identified person, and say, I think there's something funky going on here. Your mom wants to send $30,000 to Nigeria, and I've got some questions here. And then you can be brought in to help have that conversation and help mom or dad or whatever family member, help them understand that maybe this isn't a legitimate transaction that they want to engage in. Please always remember to look at life through your family member's lens, not our own. And unless that family member has been declared incapacitated for some reason, they still get to call the shots. And as frustrating as it can be, they even get to make bad decisions. One example that I use, and it's just a funny example, I suppose, is, hey, if I have a really bad week, I may go home on a Friday and decide that I am spending the evening at dinner with my two favorite men, Ben and Jerry. Clearly, it is not serving me well. It is not a good decision, but it doesn't give my adult children the authority to come to my home and clean all the ice cream out of my freezer. We get to make bad decisions. Our role is to delicately and as sensitively as possible help guide our elderly family members in making good decisions. And remember, their money is their money to use as they see fit. I have seen so many family squabbles over how elderly family members are choosing to set up their estate plan, and it's not the way the child wants. We had a situation where a gentleman had a perfectly reasonable investment portfolio. His only child decided that he didn't like the way it was invested, because when he inherited it, he wanted it all in Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. And he somehow convinced the financial professional to convert all of dad's assets into Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. That's not okay. Mom and dad's money isn't about what we want them to do with that money. It's about what they want to do with the money and how they want to spend their money. So we need to keep that in mind. I know it can be very, very challenging. I was very blessed that my sister was the primary caregiver for my mother in her later years. And I watched as my sister did an amazing job, but also struggled to care for herself, and struggled to find the resources that she needed to be able to help mom as she progressed from early stage dementia to the later stages. A couple of resources for you to keep in mind. Your local area agency on aging, and if you just Google Maine Area Agency on Aging, you'll be able to identify the agency in your area. They have great programs and resources, including their Money Minders program, which can help with budgeting and the like. And they also have programs for caregivers. My sister took advantage both of their caregiver training program and their respite program to give my sister a break, because my mom and sister lived in northern Maine, where I grew up, and there weren't a lot of family members around to assist my sister. And I've already mentioned Maine Legal Services for the Elderly. So if you haven't, again, I would suggest that you take a look at their website. Even if you or your family member don't use their services, they have tremendous amount of very valuable information on their website. So let's talk about financial frauds a little bit, because all of these categories that we were talking about, ourselves, our children, particularly our adult children, and our parents or other elderly family members, are all potential victims for financial frauds and financial exploitations. We all need to be prepared and watch out for the red flags of financial fraud and exploitation. And here's the financial fraud spectrum that I often refer to. We have family members and caregivers, and I'm going to give you little case examples here in a second. We have financial professionals in the middle, and we have unknown scammers. If we think about ourselves at a time where we are in our careers or we're just getting ready for retirement, what we really want to make sure we're protecting ourselves from is unscrupulous financial professionals and unknown scammers. We're not necessarily going to worry quite as much about family members and caregivers because we're not looking to them for our support and care. Similarly, our adult children need to keep an eye for financial professionals and unknown scammers as well, But our elderly family members, they're the ones that are really vulnerable to the entire spectrum. I want to give you some examples. So if we look at the far end, with family and caregivers as being potential perpetrators, potential fraudsters, how might that happen? We see a lot of inappropriate use of powers of attorney. We sometimes see inappropriate transfer of property. So let me give you one example. I received a phone call from a financial advisor a few years ago indicating that he had a client who was in her late 80s who lived in Connecticut. Her son and daughter-in-law and grandson lived here in Maine, and the son contacted her and said, "Mom, why don't you move to Maine? We'll buy some property and we'll build a house on it and we'll all live together." And she thought, okay, that's great. She moved to Maine. She purchased the property with her money. She built a house on the property, and the son and daughter-in-law convinced her that for estate planning purposes and to avoid the state of Maine taking the property away from her if she should need nursing home care, she should deed the property over to them. Well, because none of us know how long we're going to be around, unfortunately, the son passed away quite unexpectedly. And 2 days after the funeral, the daughter-in-law was evicting mom from the house. Fortunately, we were able to get her connected with legal services for the elderly, and they were able to get her temporary housing. They were able to stop the eviction, and they were able to get the deeding of the property unwound under Maine's Improvident Transfer Act. The court determined that the son and daughter-in-law really had, if you will, sort of scammed mom into turning the property over to them for false reasons. And so she was able to get the property back. So let's move from family members and caregivers to financial professionals there in the middle. Maine is very fortunate to have high quality, wonderfully ethical financial professionals in Maine, but there are always one or two or a handful that just head down a different path. A couple of examples that I have here are Bernie Madoff, Jordan Belfort. If you ever saw the movie The Wolf of Wall Street, that movie is about Jordan Belfort. I want to talk about a gentleman from Maine by the name of Ken Lindell, Robert Kenneth Lindell. Mr. Lindell was a well-known, trusted financial professional and a former state legislator in the state of Maine. And we learned that Mr. Lindell, who had fallen upon hard times financially, was taking advantage of two of his elderly clients. At the end of the day, we found that he had misappropriated over $2 million, nearly $3 million of money from a trust fund that one of the widows had put in place for her disabled veteran son. And the trust fund that had been put in place for the elderly female client by her husband before he passed away. And so Mr. Lindell was convicted of multiple charges and is currently serving a 10-year sentence at the Maine State Prison. Moving over to unknown scammers, I mentioned the Jamaican lottery. I also mentioned Profitable Sunrise. Profitable Sunrise was an investment scheme that reached out to people of the Christian faith, and they did this through social media. And they convinced individuals to invest their money with the understanding that on Easter of the following year, they would get all of their money back with an incredible 500% rate of return. Now, they didn't say you're going to get 500% back because that would sound incredible to all of us. Instead, they said you will get back 4% per day. And then when you annualize that, as I recall, it was 4%. Don't do the math, please, because I'm probably wrong. But they gave a relatively small percentage, but they said per day, and people overlooked the per day piece. And of course, it was just a big scam. People lost their money. It was an international scam. Right now, one of the biggest scams we're seeing is a publisher's clearinghouse scam. And people are being contacted and told that they've won Publishers Clearinghouse, they've won this huge prize, but they need to wire transfer money in order to get their prize because there are certain processing fees, and they're being asked to wire transfer tens of thousands of dollars. This particular scam is also using elderly people as money mules. So what that means is if I'm told I won the Publishers Clearinghouse, but I need to wire transfer $30,000, they're not going to tell me to wire transfer it to the scam artist. They're going to have me wire transfer it to someone in another jurisdiction, another state, who's going to receive that money into their bank account or their credit union account. And then they will be asked to then wire transfer it off to the scam artist after keeping a small percentage. So it is a way to get yet one more layer in between the victim and the perpetrator. And this is becoming very prevalent in the state of Maine, so please watch out for that. We're in February now. That means Valentine's Day, and it also means the romance scams are going to be coming out, and April and May are going to bring the IRS scams out for us as well. Things to think about. If you don't understand the product that a financial professional is selling you, or you don't understand a scheme and how it works, especially if it's too good to be true, don't walk, run away. If they're telling you that there's a guaranteed rate of return, don't walk, but run away from that promoter. Ask questions. And when you think you have asked your last question, ask some more questions. When Bernie Madoff did his first jailhouse interview, the reporter asked him if he had ever turned anyone away. And he said only when they started asking too many questions. So make sure you ask questions. And again, check before you invest. Before giving your hard-earned money away to anyone, check to make sure that the person is authorized to sell that product, sell that investment, check with our office, make sure they're properly licensed, check their background, and never buy an investment without checking to see if it's legitimate. At the end of the day, the best advice we can give is whether it's you're taking care of yourself, you're taking care of children, whether they're youth or adults, if you're helping take care of elderly family members, be aware, be informed, prepare as best as you can. You can do this. You've got this. Be realistic, try to plan ahead, find resources like the Area Agency on Aging, like legal services for the elderly. Ask for help. Don't be too proud to say, I could use some help here, and identify and utilize those resources. It is manageable. Many times it doesn't feel like it's manageable, but it is. In caring for others, I want to end with this. You do have to try to take care of yourself. As difficult as it is, it's important for us to make ourselves a priority. I often think about what they say on the airplanes. If that face mask comes down, put it over your mouth first, especially if you're traveling with children. And it seems so counterintuitive. Why would I try to save myself before I would try to save my elderly parent or my children? But it's so important. Please don't beat yourself up when things don't go as planned or as you had hoped. One of the worst days I had in visiting my mother when she was in the nursing home was when I was trying to help her and something snapped and she suddenly didn't realize who I was and she hit me. My mother had never hit me in her entire life. I really had to force myself not to dwell on that and instead focus on the fact that 15 minutes prior to that, we were singing together. So don't beat yourself up. Life is hard. A few times a day, if you can even take 5 minutes to just sit and breathe, maybe meditate, reflect on things that went well. Try not to dwell on the things that didn't go quite so well. Tomorrow's another day. Listen to music that makes you smile or that makes you sing. Dance. Go for a drive, go for a walk, laugh, find community supports and resources. Do what is going to rejuvenate you because you are only going to be able to help others if you first have taken care of yourself. So the last slide is just to give you our contact information. Please check out our website if you're interested. Here are a few things to think about. Looking at the enforcement actions that are on our website will give you an idea of the types of administrative, civil, and criminal cases that we handle, and will give you an idea, sort of a little window into the types of financial exploitation that can occur. If you click on our investor education tab, you're going to find our public service announcements. You'll see some videos there which had been running on television for a period of time. And I've been told that some people will play those videos for family members, and it sparks a conversation about scams and frauds and financial professionals and financial management. We also have a lot of informational brochures there, including information on selecting a financial professional, as I mentioned. And again, please don't hesitate to contact us and call us if you have questions about either a current financial professional you're working with, one you may work with, someone who called you out of the blue, who says, hey, if you give me money, I'm going to be starting a new business and you're going to get all that money back in 6 months plus a 10% rate of return. Call us and ask if that sounds legitimate to us. We are here to help you raise your children so that they can be financially secure, and help you support your elderly family members as best we can. We are all part of some type of sandwich, and we're all in this together. So with that, we're at the point where I'm going to take any questions that anybody may have.
Thank you, Judy. That was great. There's a lot to digest there.
Yes.
No pun intended about the sandwich. But yeah, very much so. You know, I don't see any questions in the chat, but I do have a question that some things that I've read about recently. We've all heard about the Great Resignation, and that so many people have left the workforce for a lot of different, perhaps, COVID inspired reasons, but, many of which are people that have been, their responsibilities for caretaking, both for children and for older family members, has increased, and doing it all, has become maybe, too challenging at the time. The question I wonder about is, for those people stepping out of the workforce in perhaps some of the prime of their work years, stepping away from their retirement funds, stepping away from, some of their long-term potential at the time. Any recommendations or things or resources that you know about to help people bridge that? I mean, is there a way, if there's another source of income in the family, to contribute to other retirement or college savings, for that matter, for kids? I mean, any other thoughts about that?
Yeah, it's a very interesting time, isn't it? People are, I think I'm still wrapping my head around what this Great Resignation is all about, but certainly one of the patterns I have seen with colleagues in my own workplace actually are parents who learned, when they were asked to pivot and become parents, school teachers, caregivers, all at the same time, have looked at their situations and realized that they maybe didn't have to be a two-career family. I think, as we discussed with all of this, what's most important is to be thoughtful and informed before making that decision, to really take a hard look at the family's finances overall, to really think about, what does this mean for my future retirement? We oftentimes live in the moment, and living in the moment is not a bad thing, but when it comes to finances, we can't live just in the moment. It's all about planning and looking to the future. So really planning that out, mapping it out. If you don't have a financial advisor, maybe finding a financial advisor who can help you with that financial planning, to see if you can in fact sustain a single single a parent working from working in the home and a parent continuing to pursue their career, it really cuts across all of the things we talked about tonight. You have to look at each of those segments. You have to think about the future of education for my children. Are we going to be able to continue to plan and provide for that? And how about my future in retirement? I am pleased at the increased number of young adults that I'm seeing who are opening IRAs. And so colleagues here who have chosen this path, who have said, I'm going to be a stay-at-home parent while my spouse continues to work, have been very thoughtful about making sure that they're also saving for their own retirement through their own IRA and setting those up as well. So you have to do that planning. You have to make sure that it's sustainable. Don't just say, I think being a stay-at-home dad is what I want to be at this point, without looking at the big picture and really looking at it over the long term.
Well, and based on a lot of the things you said, you were talking about, it really becomes a family affair, particularly if it's become a multi-generational household. I mean, you might be caring for an older family member, but they might not be living with you. But if the kids and the parents are together all in one home, it really becomes a family financial conversation. And
Yep. It really does. And we can't be afraid of those conversations. For the longest time, as a single mom, I really didn't want to have those conversations with my adult children. But now that I've started those conversations, it's so interesting to me to have those conversations and realize that the goals of my adult children are the same as my goals as well. And that is that I am able to eventually move into retirement, have a comfortable retirement, and not have the stress and worry of who's going to help me along the way. If I end up much like my mother with having some cognitive challenges, we might be surprised what we hear back from our adult children if we're willing to be a little bit vulnerable in that regard.
Yeah, those conversations are important. Well, I want to say thank you so much for sharing all the information tonight about the challenges of the sandwich generation and some of the many resources that are out there and things to think about. So thank you so much for your time. So on that, I'm going to say good evening and thanks for joining us.